Okay, well, if you've tuned in, this is the third video in this vlog, and this is a Base 62 encoder part 1. We're going to cover this little Base 62 encoder project I was working on where I ported it to 8 different languages. I think you'll find it interesting. So this is my background. I've written courses in Scala, Java, Spark, Cassandra, Kafka, Spring, Hibernate, JPA. Did it a lot more about 10 years ago, 15 years ago than I do now, but I still am involved in teaching and writing courses from time to time. 2018 Java champion. I wrote a JSON parser, a few other things. I was also an executive at a Fortune 100 company, a senior director of data engineering. And basically what I'm doing is just practicing creating videos. I'd like to eventually create online courseware. I enjoy creating courseware. And I'm getting used to things like Camtasia, setting up the mic. I just noticed I was using the wrong mic earlier, so probably some of my other recordings don't sound as good. But, you know, that's the idea, is just to practice, get better at this, talk about some of the projects I worked on. Hopefully, I think they're interesting. Maybe you'll find them interesting as well. And I'm going to post some of those. We'll post them all online, right, eventually. Just get better at producing videos and editing them with Camtasia. So I needed a new mic, got the new mic, figuring out how to set everything up. Need an outlining meeting notes, still not great at that, working on it. This is the Base 62, what we're covering now. More into regular production and practicing than I am making these perfect. Today we're going to be talking about this, taking this Base 62 encoder and porting it to 8 different languages to compare functional programming, part 1. Later we'll talk about index overlay parsers, service mesh, and then some engineering management sort of talks. Please tune in. I think you'll find this one interesting. If you are a programming nerd and you like to see languages compared, you might like this. So tune in. Worked on a fun little project this year. Again, this was just for fun, and I was reading a book on architecture, and the book was covering how Bitly was implemented. Bitly's a URL shortening. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I could use that same kind of thing to create slugs. Those are things that you put in URL to, you could have an ID, but you make it a little nicer looking, I suppose, and so on and so forth. So messing around with it. And of course, I'd been reading for a while. It was a large architecture book, and I felt the need to code. So I wrote a Base 62 encoder. Then, so this is my Base 62 encoder, which we'll cover the next time in detail. So I took this Base 62 encoder. This is just standard, basic Java. There's nothing magic here at all. And there was another project that was starting up, and they wanted me to do this little piece in Clojure. And that project never took off, but I was like, hey, I need a way to learn Clojure, I suppose. So I know Scala pretty well. So I figured I'd take this, port it to Scala, get it as functional as possible, and then try to port that to Clojure. It actually worked pretty well. So I took this program, moved it to Scala, and then I have a kind of a non-functional Scala version, and then I slowly kind of converted that to a more functional Scala version. And I used to teach a Scala class as well. So after I ported it to Scala, then made it functional, I ported it back to Java. I'm not sure if that was the exact order, but I created a functional Java version. Then at some point I converted it to Java 17, used some of the new constructs in Java 17. But I also kind of got interested in what it would look like in different languages. So there's a version in, there's a couple versions in Go. There's a functional version where I try to make it very functional. There's a, what I call idiomatic Go. There's, of course, all those Java examples that I was talking about earlier. Then we have stuff written in Kotlin, rewrote it in Python, Rust, and TypeScript. And part of my idea behind some of this was just to compare and contrast the support for functional programming in the different languages. So Scala versus Java support. Java's getting closer and closer, but spoiler alert, it's not there yet. Yeah, so comparing those and comparing them to Clojure too. And Clojure is alrighty. So this is the Clojure version. Found it was in it was in the wrong folder, of course. And this is sort of where we ended up. So first we ported it to Scala, made it functional, then ported it to Clojure. This is basically a transliteration of the Scala version. So every line you could sort of equate to the Scala version, which we'd kind of get into. Now that doesn't mean, that's not necessarily a good thing. So if you're a Clojure aficionado and I said this was like a transliteration of the Scala version, you're probably cringing, and that's probably the right thing to do because, yeah, I don't really know Clojure, but I knew that it was close enough that if I wrote Scala a certain way, it'd be easier to port it, which made it easier to debug because I had a hard time with the Clojure debugging tools in the, like, I don't know how to use them or how to debug a Clojure program well, which I find much easier to do Scala, but that's not, it has nothing to do with Clojure. That's me not knowing how to do it, and I still haven't figured that out, but always looking for advice and response videos. So anyway, we'll cover this after we lay the foundation, cover the first version, cover the Scala version, how we ported it, made it more functional, and then we'll cover the Clojure version if you're interested. A very syntactically terse and somewhat beautiful language. But yeah, so I thought we could cover those, cover the Clojure version, the Scala version, look at the functional programming support in the different languages, and just kind of discuss it, see what you guys think. All right, we'll tune in.